the ultimate goal here of this question is using BlackBird for discretionary trading, setting up filters within BlackBird so that, you know, when discretionarily trading, an entry will only be executed under certain, you know, charting conditions, right? So we have this kind of image here, right? So the requirement, so the charting requirement is, you know, we need the HMA 21, you know, to be sloping up or using an inflection solver. So we can see here, this image actually shows, right, the HMA, you know, going from a downslope and then inflecting upward, right? So at that inflection point there, you know, and he says with a displacement, although technically it's not a displacement there. We'll get into this in a minute. But what Randy's trying to say here is that, you know, after this inflection, basically only allow 5 bars to go by. You know, so this charting setup is only valid for like 5 bars or so after the HMA, you know, reverses up, right? Or, you know, reverses down if it's a short trade. So, all right. So there needs to be 2 bars in the same direction. So we can see here, here's our first up bar, and then here's our second up bar. And this is when the go long button, right? The go long button in BlackBird would be pressed on this button here as a manual, you know, discretionary trade. But yeah, but Randy wants to utilize, you know, some BloodHound logic to verify that, you know, that these various charting conditions have occurred, so that if he does hit go long by accident, you know, BlackBird won't execute the trade until BloodHound has confirmed, you know, these various charting conditions. Okay. So that's the ultimate goal here, is to, yeah, place kind of a filtering mechanism within BlackBird, and more specifically, this filtering mechanism coming from BloodHound is going to be applied to the entry order here, right? So today we're going to do the BloodHound part, and then tomorrow we'll wrap this question up by doing the BlackBird part tomorrow. So yeah, so today we'll work on creating these, I don't really want to say filtering mechanisms, confirmation. Yeah, so BloodHound is going to you know, confirm that these various charting conditions, you know, have indeed, you know, occurred. Yeah, to then, which will then allow the entry signal to actually execute inside of BlackBird, right? So again, this is not a trade signal. So this is slightly different, you know, in that this is not creating a trade signal, right? So, I mean, we are kind of building what looks like a trade signal, but it's how it's going to be applied and utilized within BlackBird, right? So what we build in BloodHound won't be used in the trade signals settings for BlackBird. It's going to be used as a filtering mechanism within the entry order there. So, okay, so back to what we're looking for. So we have this HMA here. So we need the slope, right, to be sloping up here. So actually on the bar where the you know, trade gets executed on here, right, we can see that the HMA did finally start sloping upward, at least on this bar here, right? It was still sloping down on the bar, you know, where the go long button was pressed there. And what else here? Yeah, we need 2 bar directions. Yeah, so actually we have previous bar here, we have an up bar here, we have an up bar here, so we have 2 up bars, right, before the final condition here, you know, which would allow the entry order to get executed. And then lastly, you know, basically this permissive, that's a good word for it. So what we're building is a permissive, you know, that actually allows the entry order to fire off within BlackBird. So only allow 1 trade, right, per slope slope direction of the HMA. Right, so only one trade direction. So since we only want to allow one ultimately one trade per direction, per sloping of the HMA, I'm going to actually use the inflection solver for this. We'll figure this out here once we start building here. So I don't think I'll actually need the slope solver. I think we can just do this with the inflection solver here. Okay, all right, so I already have the HMA on my chart there. So let's get BloodHound open. All right, well, so first thing you need to do, first thing you want to do is, create a file name for the system that you're building here. So, all right, let's save that. I always like to start with the easiest components first here. So there we go. Let's look for 2 bars, right? Let's require that we need 2 bars in a row here. So let's add a bar direction. Put that on there. And so number of bars is we need 2. Now, and we're also going to need the start bars ago set to 1. Right? So why does start bars ago need to be set to 1? Right? Basically, effectively with the start bars ago is, in effect, it's doing the same thing as Ninja's displacement here. Now, so just let me remind you, the displacement in this description here is actually incorrect. We'll get back to this once I add the inflection solver. We'll get back to this here. But start bars ago is effectively the same thing as displacement. But remember, the bar direction is not an indicator. So you're right. The displacement only applies to indicators, right? So if I open up this HMA in the indicator window, right, NinjaTrader has this displacement setting here, within the properties. All right. So so what this displacement is doing is effectively the same thing as what the start bars ago is doing, which is shifting everything forward, 1 bar. Right? So if you have it set to 1, you're shifting your bar direction forward 1 bar. If you set it to 2, then you're shifting your bar directions forward 2 bars. Yeah, so for example, stretch this out. Right? So we do have 2 up bars, but there's no signal, right, on these. The signal is actually right here, right? It's 2 bars afterwards, and that's because of the start bars ago. So if I set this back down to 0, there we go, right? There is 2 up bars, and there's the signal on the second up bar. So, right, but we need 2 up bars prior to the bar that generates the permissive signal, right? So I need the output from these 2 up bars on the next bar, right, to keep in line with the screenshot that we have, right? So we have an up bar, but remember the permissive signal from BloodHound takes place on this 3rd bar, right? So there we go. So we need the signal, or I should say signal, I should say output coming from the bar direction, right, from these 2 up bars, and it just needs to be applied to the 1 bar forward there. All right, and let's rename this here. There we go. So this is actually a 2 bar direction there. Okay, so we've taken care of the easy part. All right, so this isn't much more difficult, but let's work on the inflection part here. Right, so again, going back to the screenshot, right, this discretionary trade is only, I'm inferring that, because of this displacement set to 5, that, this permissive is only allowed to last for, you know, about 5 bars after the HMA, you know, starts reverses upwards here. So let's add a inflection solver. There we go, right there in the middle of the list. Connect that in. And let's give this a name. All right, HMA 21. There. All right, and let's go change our indicator here. All right, so instead of the SMA, we need to plug in the HMA. All right, so on the box up here, let's just type in HMA. There we go. Use the filtering. And we have a 21 period there. There we go. Click OK. There we go. And so the displacement here, what really should be here is the look back period. So we're going to increase this up to 5, like so. All right, there. And let's see here. Yeah, we did get an index out of range error. So let's close this, do a reload here. There we go. All right, now we're back in business. So what this look back period does is, you can see it's taken the inflection, you know, output, and it's extending it, you know, an additional, you know, X number of bars. All right, so if I put this back to 1, back to 1, there we go, right? We only have, right, the 1 bar output here when the moving average, right, reverses up or inflects up. So, but we want to extend this out for 5 bars, right? So this charting pattern here, or this permissive, you know, to take a long trade, is only going to last, you know, these 5 bars, right? And once we get past that point, then there's no more possibility of a signal. Or I shouldn't be calling this a signal, because it's not a trade signal, but it's a permissive. All right, so we have 2 conditions, and let's start joining them together using an AND node, like so. And there we go, right? So we had 2 up bars, and then, right, so and this would be the bar, you know, where the signal could take place, and it actually would have taken place. So here's another thing that I haven't gotten into yet, which is that, right, this permissive needs to wait for, right, this bar here to move up 2 ticks, right? So from the open, the market needs to move up from the open 2 ticks above the open, right? And that is the final condition, right, that that completes this permissive here, right? So, right, so we can see here on this bar, right, it opens here, and we can see from this high wick that the market did move up 2 ticks, right? So this actually would have generated a signal there. Yeah. So that's the final step that we need to look for, is make sure that the high price at least went 2 ticks above the open. So from the open 2 ticks above. So to do that, right, we're essentially comparing the high of the bar to the open price. And so to do that, we're going to use a comparison solver. All right, so with the comparison solver, we're going to compare the open, right, and then 2 ticks to either the high for a long signal, or, right, negative 2 ticks to the low of the bar if it's a short signal. So, all right, so input A is going to be the open of the bar. Well, actually, no, sorry. Let's actually reverse this. This will be easier to understand. I mean, we could do it both ways, but I think it's a little more intuitive to do it this way. So we actually, we want to check if the high reached 2 ticks above the open there. So doing it this way means that when we go into the comparison settings here, we have to make a minimum amount of changes here, and we'll get into that in just a moment here. All right, so let's put in the high and the low prices into input A. So let's switch the input type to price. So for a long signal, we're looking at the high of the bar. And so for a short signal, we're looking at the low of the bar. All right, now input B, that's going to be the open price. So let's switch input B, also switch that over to price. And then the prices here is going to be the open of the bar. There we go, open, and switch it to the open. There we go. All right, so now we need to add in that 2-tick offset here from the open price. All right, so let's open up the comparison settings. Right, there we go. So that brings up the rules window. So we're looking for the high to be greater than the open plus 2, not points, but 2 ticks. There we go. Now, it's not the high greater than the open plus 2 ticks. It's, 2 ticks actually includes, right? So the high can be greater than or equal to the open plus 2 ticks. So, yeah, be mindful that if you need to include the open to do that here. So from the low needs to be less than the open, all right, minus 2 ticks. So, but we're going to also include the equals there. All right, so minus 2, and switch this over to ticks. There. All right, and hit OK. And there we have it. So, right. So remember, we're only looking at this one comparison solver here. So when we look at, the output, well, let's focus on this bar, right? So from the open, right? So that's the open, right? The low did not go 2 ticks below the open, so there's no short output. But obviously the high of the bar is 2 ticks above the open, so there is a long output. Right. And if we look at this bar, right, here's the open, so obviously the low is 2 ticks below the open, so we have a short output, but there's no long output, right, because the high only went 1 tick above the open. Okay. And now, on this bar here, right, so this is where we'll be getting a permissive signal here. So on this bar, obviously you can see the high went 2 ticks above the open, and the low went 2 ticks. So we're going to get a long and a short. But but again, that's just this one condition here. But once we actually plug it in, there we go. So now we actually get some filtering going on here. And so there is our signal. Now, only one signal per direction of the HMA. So in theory, let's see here. Let's go back to the inflection solver, right? So in theory, the inflection solver, right, is allowing signals for 5 bars. So we could, in theory, get more permissive signals here. It just so happens that we got a down bar here, so that kind of interrupted the 2 up bars, 2 up bars in a row there. So, and this last bar here, the high only got 1 tick above the open. So that's why we didn't get a signal there, right? Let's take a look at that, right? Yeah, no, right? We got 2 up bars, but the high only got 1 tick above, not 2 ticks. So no signal there. Otherwise, we would have had another long signal here. So what we need is to include a signal blocker to make sure, yeah, that we don't get more than just the one signal. So let's see here. Let's go back to this screenshot here. So the screenshot shows, right, that actually the up bars can actually start while the HMA is still sloping down. So yeah, so in theory, I guess it is possible that we could actually get a signal. Let's see. Yeah, so if this was an up bar, there we go. So if this was actually an up bar, then we would have gotten a permissive signal here, and that leaves the door open that we could get permissive signals, you know, on the next 4 following bars. So we need to block at least 4 bars. Yeah, we need to block the first or the following 4 bars here to make sure that we don't get more than 1 signal. So oops, wrong one. Yeah, make sure you connect this into the input there. And so for the signal blocker, you know, it's defaulted to blocking for 5 bars, but you know, we could leave it at 5. That's fine. Yeah, I'll just leave it at 5, whatever. But we do need to reset the signal blocker, because what happens if, you know, right? Well, let's actually take a look at the chart. Yeah, looky here. So perfect example, right? So we get a long signal, and then the HMA rolls over, right, and then presents a short signal there, right? So we want to make sure that the signal blocker is not going to be blocking this short signal, and we can actually, we're confirming that the signal blocker is not preventing this short signal. Yeah, so actually we don't need to adjust anything with the resets here, and that's because by default here we have input opposite signals is enabled. So this here, actually, sorry, let me back up. So I'm going to turn on the active blocking here. There, let's put 2 on there. There we go. Right. So what this actively blocking allows you to do is kind of debug your system here. So for example, here we go. Let's look at this long signal here. So we get this long signal, and we can see we get this 0.2 output, and that's telling us that the signal blocker is actively blocking long signals, right? Because it's a long output, so it's actively blocking long signals. So but we can see here that well, we can see that it's not actively blocking short signals because there's no short output there. So, but also more importantly here is that when we get this long signal, right, it's actively blocking longs, but then the HMA reverses down, it generates a signal, and actually we can't always rely on a permissive signal to occur, so we are going to make some adjustments to this. But the point is that, right, we need to reset the signal blocker, because, you know, what if we get this reverse up on the HMA, we get a reverse down, and then we get another reverse up, right? And so another long signal could, you know, should be allowed to go through, if we get this quick, reversing action here of the HMA, reversing down, reversing up. So actually what we need to do is use this inflection solver to reset the signal blocker. So let's see here. So we're not going to use the reset signal. We can keep the input opposite signal on, that's fine. But what we really want is reset on an opposite signal. So, yeah, so what have we just done here? So let's kind of go over this. Now, I'm just going to give the short version here, to learn about, how all of these reset options work. You can watch the video on the signal blocker there, or go over the documentation. So, but essentially, so input opposite signal. Well, input applies to the input connection. Reset applies to the reset connection. So input opposite signal. Well, we can see here we have a long signal, and now the signal blocker is blocking long signals. So if the input receives an opposite signal, and of course a short signal is opposite of the long signals, then this short signal coming into the input right, is what's resetting the signal blocker, right? So input opposite signal means this short signal coming into the input is what's resetting the signal blocker, right? So that's so the active blocking of the long signals here turns off because this short signal coming into the input opposite signal, right? Turns off the long signal blocking. And then also the reset opposite signal. So we know that when this HMA, right, rolls over, the inflection solver is producing. Let me zoom out here. There we go. So there, right? So if we look at the inflection solver, right, once the HMA rolls over, right, we have all these short outputs, right, going into the reset, right? So we have this inflection solver connected to the reset connection, right? So that means input, not input, reset opposite signal, right? So right now, let's actually take a look at this, right? So right now, the signal blocker is actively blocking long signals. So what's the opposite of a long? This short. So if a short, signal comes into the reset, that also turns off the signal blocker. Now, because I have the inflection solver connected into the reset, the reality is we don't actually need the input opposite signal. I could turn that off and just allow the inflection solver to do all the resetting, right? And I'm gonna get the same results. So, but I'll just leave it on, I don't know, just because. It's not really gonna matter here. All right. So we have the signal blocker set up now so that we only get one signal per trade direction, because let's take a look here. Yeah, see, so without the signal blocker, right, we got all these down bars, and so look, we actually have 3 bars here that meet those permissive requirements, and so we get signal, well, permissive signal, permissive signal, permissive signal. Right, so this is the situation where, yeah, we want to block the 2 extra permissive signals. And so that's why we need the signal blocker. There we go. And, oh, okay, yeah. And one last thing important here, which is, so remember this comparison solver is identifying when, so in this case right here, right, the signal is supposed to happen as soon as the market moves 2 ticks above the open, right? So this is supposed to happen in real time, right? So Randy doesn't want to wait for the bar to close. He wants, right, so when he presses the go long button on this bar, he wants BlackBird to execute the entry order as soon as, right, the market moves 2 ticks higher than the open. Right, so this signal needs to happen, or this permissive signal needs to happen in real time. So what that means is, oh, oops, oh, I closed my browser. Oh, good, there we go. All right, so what that means is for BloodHound, let's go into the indicator window here. So BloodHound, really, in order to test this properly, we need to set the calculate to on price change, like so. Either on price change or on each tick. So really on price change should be fine. So click it like that, and let's actually see. Well, look at that. We actually might get a signal here. Holy smokes. Come on. Move up another tick. Ah! So, oh, well, the HMA actually didn't roll over yet. Yeah, let's change the indicator. There we go. All right, here we go. So the HMA is beginning to roll up. There we go. All right, so we might, if we can get an up bar. All right. Oh, there we go. Good. So there we go. We got a short signal. So the HMA rolled up, and then it rolled back down. We got 2 down bars, and there we go. We can see that, right, the low of the bar did go 2 ticks lower than the open, and there was our permissive signal, right? And so again, that, you know, the end result that we want to see here, you know, the bottom line is this permissive signal will be used in BlackBird. Yeah, it'll be used in BlackBird tomorrow to allow the entry signal to actually execute. All right, so yeah, that does it there for today's first question. And let me see if there's any follow-ups on this. All right. No, I don't see any follow-ups on this so far. And, oh, good. Yep, there we go. There's another example of a long permissive signal there. And we can see here that the signal blocker is actively blocking. All right,